Great. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, I'll be presenting in English. I hope that's okay with everybody. I was told there'd be the interpreter, but I know there's been lots of technical hiccups. But anyway, yeah, thanks for having me. Sorry I can't be there in Montreal. Um, so today I'm going to be presenting on workplace well-being, I guess this overarching theme for this panel. It's a critical paper. So really critiquing the ideological role of well-being and trying to identify and analyze its place in contemporary transformation of labor relations. I currently got this paper under review, but I imagine it's still in development. So any feedback, very welcome, even if it's after the session. So well-being is near ubiquitous theme in the contemporary workplace. It's in the UK where I am, over half of employers report formal health and well-being strategies. This is across sectors and industries. Organizations offer and implement an array of well-being relevant practices and policies. Most popular strategies are related to promoting normatively healthy lifestyles or employee assistance programs, these types of initiatives. It's a very profitable business. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. There are big vendors like Vitality Health and Virgin. It's well covered in the press. There's special reports in the Financial Times. And over recent years, it's been increasingly covered by both national governments and NGOs, supranational organizations like the WHO, OECD, UN. So it's a topic that has only been growing in prevalence, often explicitly around well-being. But as we'll see, this agenda is actually predominantly led by several influential third sector and corporate organizations, rather than it necessarily being a public agenda. We can see sort of big consultancy firms like McKinsey and PwC present as being very committed to well-being, just as long as you don't actually work for them. But they've got some nice peaceful looking images here. All of this is very well supported by researchers in applied psychology and business studies. We're supposed to believe the mutual benefits for business and workers. So despite this, many in critical management studies, industrial relations, sociology, many are critical of this sort of dominant well-being discourse, the dominant workplace well-being discourse. So multiple points of contestation against well-being at work. So firstly, individualism, especially the way well-being is responsibilized as individuals' own problem. Workers should be the entrepreneurs of their life and take care of their health. Second, there's these sort of productivity imperatives. Well-being is only deemed important because happy workers work harder. Idealized workers is similar, but there's quite a lot of concern around the way that racial, gendered, and body discrimination can occur in well-being policy and narratives. Blurring of workers' work and life domains. Then also that many see well-being as sort of management soft control of workers. There's also cynicism towards corporate strategy. A big organization can look virtuous or compassionate and often give them a reputational alibi, even when conducting harmful work practices. Trade unions are also a bit cynical. That is maybe a way to kind of circumvent their role in concern for the welfare of workers. And seventh is around depoliticization. This is where I'll kind of focus my efforts, but really the idea that work becoming less and less a site of contestation. And I hope you enjoy the meme here as well. So this critical perspective has been around for a couple of decades, but it's not really matured that much. The arguments that we could read 20 years ago are the same that we could read today. There are several limitations, really. It's often fragmented around these kind of 7 points I've made. The fact that I've listed them is quite rare in the field. Nobody seems to outline what the actual problems are. It's bad for lots of reasons. So we need to synthesize this critique. There's also really a focus purely on workplace well-being as a kind of internal organizational policy and discourse, rather than thinking of it and placing it in wider changes around labor relations and the labor market. So hopefully this will do. There's also, a bit of a lack of empirical support for a lot of criticism. Lots of it's discursive and theoretical. This is getting better though in recent years. And then the sort of fourth limitation is there's a kind of symbolic radicalism about it, which really risks rejecting outright the very idea of well-being, despite, I'm sure, all Labour researchers at this conference do have a sort of normative commitment to improving the quality of working life for people. So these are the problems which I am aiming to address all of them. So really this study is a mixed methods discourse analysis. So I wanted to look at business resources, as a sort of ideal of what's supposed to be happening in the name of work well-being. In order to do this, I analyzed resources from an information site in the UK called Mental Health at Work. This maybe actually I'll go on to the next page. So it looks like this. It's a very public-facing online resource, and I've analyzed 500 different bits of information that are contained on this. It's long lists of sort of PDFs and strategy guides and training resources and this type of thing. This site was actually the product of government recommendations as a product of one of their independent reviews, but it's hosted by Mind, who are a big mental health charity. I'm not sure how many will know about it. But then lots of the funding, you can go in and look at where they get their money, and lots of it comes from big corporations like banks and consultancy firms. So it's, kind of resembles the way the well-being is, it's not a government. The government sort of recommends it, but it's not taken on as their responsibility. Analyzing these resources, I'm not going to go into methods. Nobody's here to think about methods. But yeah, I sort of did some textual analysis, regular content analysis, and some reading it, qualitative thematic analysis. Kind of guided by some research questions around, how is it problematized and what practices are recommended in response, and how can we understand this as a change in contemporary work. So really, from this analysis, there are 5 ways that well-being is problematized.
Par laquelle on fait,
Pierre, maybe if you could mute yourself. So there are 5 problematizations, really. I think firstly, there's a sort of individualism. This is already there, and so a lot of the criticisms, and we can see this in various discursive practices and also recommended policies and organizations. It focuses on subjective stress and resilience, sort of wellness and health lifestyles, but then also in the sort of a mission of collective approaches to employee welfare. And you can see trade unions have no mention in any of these resources, despite the multitude of organizations who did provide resources for this hub. There's also an emphasis on sort of peer support rather than it being managers' responsibilities. There's this sort of emphasis on, colleague-to-colleague support through ideas of like mental health, first aid, and these types of things. Then so the next, relatedly, is a sort of ongoing economization, primarily in thinking about the sort of business case for well-being, thinking about the impacts on productivity, the costs from absence. There's very much an economic framing of this problem of work and well-being. In terms of responses, that's, so these are kind of overarching framings, but then actually the next 3 sort of problematizations are more about the response. So, very much as an emphasis on voluntarism in response. So, we can see this by the fact it's the third sector that puts forward that hosts these recommendations. There are several, numerous corporate pledges, and organizations say, yeah, we care very much about the mental health of our staff. Lots of surveillance and monitoring mechanisms, which are quite complicated, with whether it's supportive or coercive. Role of non-state organizations and especially employer forums. So this hub is sort of orchestrated by a series of powerful private organizations, Mind and various banks and this type of thing. So the idea is stepping away from the government and regulation. Then there's also emphasis on stigma, things like awareness raising, training around stigma, and also very much an emphasis on DEI, so diversity, equality, and inclusion. I think I'll move on and sort of link that in a little bit more. But the main argument I'm really trying to make with all these sort of 5 problematizations is that what it represents is sort of deliberate top-down approach for improving people's subjective experiences of work. But these strategies actually cement dominance of capital management. They don't change anything about how work is designed and implemented. In this regard, it's a hegemonic reform of labor, which must be, we have to contextualize it in recent trends in labor transformation. This sort of achieves it really in four ways. There's an avoidance and exclusion of contestation, negotiation, and disagreement. Second, and relatedly, there's a democratic influence on labor reform, including both state and worker intervention, is diminished in favor of corporate voluntarism, the outsourcing of regulation to technocratic bodies, so like health and safety bodies and conciliatory bodies, and also outsourcing to third sector partners like Mind, this mental health charity. And instead, the state takes on this role as an exemplary employer. So in the UK, if you work for the health service or the public sector, there are vast arrays of kind of well-being and wellness-related policies and job perks. Third, there's also reliance on discursive responses. So this really is avoiding practical engagement with the working conditions in proposed interventions. It's very much, for example, with when it's conjoined with these arguments around EDI, is that mental health and well-being is a problem because it sort of feels bad, and that various social inequalities and social groups can experience this more negatively. So this moves it towards inequality as a discursive problem and an affective problem, rather than structural or justice-based critiques of inequality, which I think most of us would be used to. Then finally, is this sort of ongoing instrumentalization of workers and their well-being for economic concerns of costs and productivity. And these four features demonstrate that workplace well-being relies on depolitical discourses and employer-led reform. It's very much advocated by employers, while also moving towards a general depoliticized position where work is no longer viewed as a site of conflict. Just to finish up, I think I've got about 50 seconds. My main contribution, what I'm trying to get, is the limitations in existing critique. I'm trying to synthesize these various points of criticism by really understanding that well-being is the dominant approach is one of labor reform, but via depolitical strategies, and in this respect, it's a hegemonic phenomenon. There's also some sort of empirical developments by looking at this wide range of documents. And then my final contribution, which I don't have time for now, so I come under my time, is actually with discussions of work and well-being, there's really an opportunity for what critical management scholars call critical performativity, which is really about engaging how critics can engage in a proactive manner in order to improve the quality of people's working life. Well-being is it's a pertinent issue. People think about it, they care about it as they navigate labor markets. There's also a promise of that we can have an impact in improving working conditions. There's also opportunities for collective and organizational resistance. Lots of narrative around resistance of well-being practices has been quite individualized. How do single people avoid various ideals. But then finally, there's also kind of an opportunity for co-designed alternatives. So I think researchers, trade unions, and workers, can identify better ways for improving work that don't rely on the insufficient ideas currently held on the types of resource hubs that I analyzed. Okay, that's me finished.